The morning sun peeked through the dusty curtains of Aisha's small rented room. She stared at her shoes, once shiny black, now faded, scratched and torn at the sides. She pressed her fingers against the cracked leather, hoping glue would hold them together one more time. Today was not just another day. It was the day, her biggest job interview after months of rejection. Her reflection in the mirror told a story of resilience. She had neatly ironed her only formal dress, tied her hair with care, and put on the brightest smile she could muster. "Shoes don't matter," she whispered to herself. "My skills do." But deep inside, fear gnawed at her. She knew people noticed everything, and she couldn't afford a new pair. When she entered the tall glass building, her confidence wavered. 33 other candidates were already seated, all in sharp suits, polished shoes, and carrying expensive portfolios. A hush fell over the room when Aisha walked in. Eyes dropped instantly to her shoes. A few candidates whispered, and muffled laughter spread like wildfire. Aisha pretended not to hear. She clutched her folder tightly and focused on her breathing. One job, that's all I need. One chance to prove myself. The interviews began one by one. Candidates walked out with fake smiles hiding their nerves. When Aisha's turn came, she stepped forward, heart racing, and entered the grand office of the CEO. The man behind the desk was tall, calm and observant. His sharp eyes scanned her from head to toe. For a moment she froze, thinking he would notice her torn shoes immediately. But instead he smiled and said, "Please have a seat. Tell me your story." At that instant, Aisha realized this interview was not just about her resume, it was about her journey. Aisha sat across from the CEO, her hands trembling slightly as she placed her folder on the desk. The CEO's office was nothing like she had ever seen. Floor to ceiling, windows with a view of the city, shelves lined with awards, and a calm silence that made every sound echo. The CEO leaned forward, fingers interlocked. "Aisha, your resume says you've been unemployed for almost a year. Why?" Her throat tightened. This was the question she dreaded most. She took a deep breath. "Sir, after my father's passing, I had to take on responsibility for my younger siblings. I worked part-time jobs, sometimes 3 at once, just to keep our household running. It left me little time to pursue full-time positions. But now," she paused, steadying her voice, "I am ready to dedicate myself completely." The CEO's eyes didn't blink. He studied her as though weighing her soul, not her words. "And these shoes?" he asked suddenly, glancing down. The air grew heavier. Aisha's face flushed. For a moment, her carefully built wall of confidence cracked. She wanted to hide her feet under the chair. But instead, she forced herself to meet his gaze. "They're old," she admitted softly. "I couldn't afford new ones. But I believe my shoes don't define my abilities, sir. They only remind me where I come from and why I work so hard to move forward." Silence, a long, tense silence. Then the CEO leaned back, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Interesting." Across the glass wall, the HR panel was still watching. Some of them scribbled notes. Others exchanged doubtful glances. But the CEO's eyes remained locked on Aisha, as if he had seen something the others missed. When she walked out of the room, whispers returned. A few candidates laughed, mocking the girl with the torn shoes. But one thing was different now. Aisha no longer cared. She had spoken her truth. What she didn't know was that her words had left a mark deeper than she imagined. One that would soon turn the entire competition upside down. The waiting hall buzzed with tension as candidates compared notes about their interviews. Some bragged about their degrees, others about their foreign internships. But when Aisha walked back in, silence fell for a brief moment, followed by chuckles. "She's still here," one whispered loudly. "With shoes like that, she won't make it past round 1, another sneered. Aisha heard every word, but she kept her chin high. She sat quietly, folded her hands in her lap, and reminded herself, "I didn't come here to impress them. I came here to prove myself." Soon the HR manager entered with a clipboard. "Attention, everyone. The CEO has shortlisted 10 candidates for the next stage." He began reading names. Each announcement brought sighs of relief and disappointed groans. By the 7th name, Aisha had almost given up hope. Her heart sank, but then, "And the 8th shortlisted candidate is Aisha Khan, The room went dead silent. Heads turned, jaws dropped. One of the men who had laughed the loudest muttered, "Impossible." Aisha froze in disbelief. She had expected nothing, but now her name was on the list of only 10. She swallowed hard, her palms sweaty, but her heart lit with courage. The HR continued, "The next stage will be a group discussion. You will be evaluated not just on knowledge, but on leadership, teamwork, and vision." When the candidates were escorted to the conference room, Aisha could feel their hostility. They saw her not as competition, but as an intruder in their elite circle. The discussion began with a challenging topic: what makes a true leader in times of crisis? One by one, candidates boasted about management theories, corporate strategies, and case studies from prestigious business schools. Aisha listened quietly, taking notes. When her turn finally came, the room leaned in with smirks, expecting her to stumble. But she spoke with calm conviction. A true leader isn't someone who only knows theories. A true leader is the one who stands strong when everything falls apart. Someone who takes responsibility when others run away. I've lived that reality every day while supporting my family. Leadership isn't about position. It's about sacrifice and resilience. Her voice was steady, her words simple, yet they carried a weight that silenced the room. Even the CEO, watching through the glass panel, leaned forward with interest. By the time the discussion ended, the same people who had mocked her shoes could no longer laugh. They had just witnessed something they hadn't expected: strength that came from experience, not luxury. The group discussion ended, and the candidates were asked to wait once more. Tension filled the air like a storm cloud. Some whispered bitterly about Aisha, their envy now mixed with fear. "She's just lucky," one muttered. "Luck doesn't last long. Let's see her fail in the next round," another replied. Aisha sat silently, ignoring their words. Inside, however, her heart raced. She didn't know if her words had been enough. The room suddenly hushed as the HR manager returned. "The CEO wants to meet 3 candidates personally for a final evaluation. Those names are..." He paused for effect, scanning the room. "Arman Malik, Natasha Roy, and Aisha Khan." Gasps filled the hall. Natasha, dressed in a designer suit, raised an eyebrow with disdain. Arman clenched his jaw, clearly angry. Both had resumes that sparkled with privilege, while Aisha had nothing but determination. The 3 of them were led into the CEO's office. He didn't sit behind his desk this time. Instead, he stood by the window, gazing at the skyline. "Congratulations," he said. "You are the finalists. But this last stage isn't about your resumes or theories. It's about who you are." He turned to them. "Here's your task. You have 1 hour. Imagine our company is facing a crisis. Our biggest client has just left. How will you save the company?" Natasha jumped in first, speaking with rehearsed confidence. She talked about marketing strategies, partnerships, and investments. Her words sparkled like polished glass, but they lacked depth. Arman followed, listing numbers, charts, and financial jargon. He sounded professional, but his plan was more about showing off knowledge than solving a problem. Finally, it was Aisha's turn. She took a breath, her hands slightly shaking, but her voice steady. "Sir, in crisis, numbers and strategies matter. But first, people matter. If employees lose faith, no plan will work. I would start by uniting the team, being transparent about the challenge, and encouraging them to fight with me, not for me. A company survives when its people believe they can survive." Her words hung in the air. For the first time, the CEO's eyes softened. He nodded slowly, as though hearing an echo of something he once believed himself. The hour ended. The CEO dismissed them with a simple, "Thank you. We'll decide soon." As they stepped out, Natasha smirked at Aisha. "Don't get your hopes up. Shoes like yours don't walk into boardrooms." But Aisha smiled calmly. "Maybe not. But courage does." Little did Natasha know, the decision was already tilting in Aisha's favor. The day dragged on as the candidates waited for the CEO's final decision. Every tick of the clock felt heavier than the last. Some candidates left quietly, disappointed. Others lingered in the lobby, whispering about the shocking rise of the girl with the torn shoes. Natasha and Arman sat together, their frustration boiling over. "This is humiliating," Natasha hissed. "We spent years polishing our careers, and now we're competing with her. She shot a glare at Aisha, who sat calmly in the corner, clutching her worn-out folder. Arman smirked. She won't last. I'll make sure of it. When Aisha excused herself to get water, she left her folder on the chair. The folder held her resume, recommendation letters, and certificates, the only proof of her years of struggle. Arman's eyes flickered with mischief. He slid closer, whispering, "If those papers vanish, so does her chance." Natasha hesitated but didn't stop him. In a swift move, Arman slipped 2 of her certificates under his own pile of documents. When Aisha returned, she noticed the folder felt lighter. Her heart pounded as she flipped through the pages. 2 certificates gone, panic clawed at her chest. Without them, her achievements could be questioned. She looked around. Natasha smirked. Arman avoided eye contact. But instead of confronting them, Aisha closed her folder firmly and whispered to herself, "They can steal my papers, but not my truth." Moments later, the HR manager called her into the CEO's office. As she entered, the CEO glanced at her tense face. "Is everything all right?" he asked. Aisha hesitated. For a split second, she thought of exposing Arman, but then she shook her head. "Yes, sir. Everything is fine." The CEO studied her carefully. "Good, because before I announce the result, I have one last question." He leaned forward, his voice low but piercing. "Why should I choose you over candidates who have better shoes, better clothes, and better connections?" Aisha's throat tightened. She could feel her heartbeat in her ears. Slowly she answered, her voice trembling yet powerful. "Because, sir, shoes wear out, clothes fade, connections break, but strength, honesty, and resilience, those last forever. I may not look like the best on paper, but I promise I'll fight for this company with everything I have. My torn shoes don't define my worth. My journey does." The CEO's eyes locked on hers. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then he smiled, a smile that told her she had already won. The remaining candidates gathered in the boardroom. Tension so thick, it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. 33 hopefuls had entered this building in the morning. Now only 3 remained: Aisha, Natasha, and Arman. The CEO entered with slow, deliberate steps. Every eye followed him, every breath held captive. He placed a folder on the table and spoke in a calm, commanding voice. "Today I've seen talent, knowledge, and ambition, but I wasn't looking for perfection. I was looking for something else, something far more valuable." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Resilience, honesty, heart." Natasha leaned forward, flashing a confident smile. Arman straightened his shoulders, trying to mask his nerves. Aisha simply sat still, hands clasped, silently praying. The CEO opened the folder. Out of 33 candidates, only 1 stood out. Not because of polished shoes or fancy degrees, but because she showed strength in the face of judgment and spoke with truth instead of pride. He looked directly at Aisha. "The candidate I choose is Aisha Khan." The room erupted in gasps. Natasha's face drained of color. Arman's fists clenched in disbelief. Some of the other rejected candidates whispered angrily, but their voices faded as Aisha sat frozen, barely able to breathe. "Me, sir?" she stammered. "Yes, you," the CEO replied with a firm nod. Then, with surprising gentleness, he added, "Do you know why your words moved me? Because many years ago, I came for my first interview wearing shoes just like yours, torn, old, mocked by everyone. No one believed in me, except one person who looked past appearances. Today it is my turn to do the same." Aisha's eyes filled with tears. She bowed her head, her heart swelling with gratitude. The CEO extended his hand. She shook it firmly, her torn shoes planted proudly on the marble floor. As she left the boardroom, whispers turned into stunned silence. The girl they had laughed at, ridiculed, and dismissed had become the one chosen by the CEO, and with every step of her worn-out shoes, Aisha carried not just victory but a lesson for everyone who had ever been judged by appearances. True worth is never worn on the outside.